Расплескалась синева, расплескалась. Что там? We are beginning not at the railway station or at the city center. We are standing in front of the Museum of Russian Airborne Forces. After the Second World War, the place began one of the major bases preparing future pilots and defenders of Russian air. Besides, the Airborne School also hosts the Automobile School, the Institute of Communications, Regiment of Railway Troops, Air Base, Strategic Bombers, and a training center in the region in Diaghilev. But if you want to find out more, not only about our military force, but about the city in itself and Russia in itself, then welcome to Ryazan. It's Weekender Girl and we begin. Traveling by car certainly differs from traveling by train or going on foot, but here we are and our first destination point. Behind me is a statue to one of the most famous Russian scientist, a physiologist, a specialist in classical conditioning, Ivan Pavlov, a Nobel Prize winner. By the way, 1904 medicine, just so you know. There is also an art gallery, local theatre, local arts and crafts museum. So yes, if you want to, you can go and see. Very nice, lots of things to see. So, a park, monuments, bus, yeah, boring stuff. Actually, if you can hear me, the historical center of the city is not as old as I might have suspected it actually, except for the Kremlin and churches and cathedrals. Most of the city is built in classicism, and bits of modern style are shown all around, like for example that house. What else can I say? It's winter, it's cold, lots of snow, lots of people. But the city is nice, at least what I have already seen. But better reserve judgment to the very end of the journey. Yeah, another building. You see? Yay! Another building. Lots of them, very beautiful, but this Soviet architecture sometimes it just ruins it all. Pity. Well, and now to the old part of the city, and while we are moving on, we are going to see something non-Soviet here. You might say that in every city, not in Russia, but like everywhere in the world, every city has a theater, and that's true, definitely. But for Russia, the emergence of a theater in a city at 18th century had a particular meaning due to the fact that theater was an expensive thing, you know, to support, to provide with costumes, stuff, just with food and money, like, you know, the absolutely basic needs that had to be covered, they should have been covered at the owner's expense. Therefore, there are not that many theaters till the 19th century, I'd say. The very first one, as you know, emerged in Kaluga at the end of the 18th century, 1770s. Somewhat like that. And the theater in Ryazan, which is behind me, the yellow building, is amongst one of the oldest ones in Russia. It consisted primarily of freed people and serfs, as most of the theaters. and primarily it was an opera theatre. Now it is an opera and drama theatre, but primarily they show just normal drama plays, and that's it. Still very nice, I'd say. A classicist building, of course, a little bit reconstructed and rebuilt, but what hasn't been rebuilt after the Second World War?
From theatre to makeup, if you are a fashionista and makeup lover, you'll definitely like this part and learn something new.
We are not exactly at the city center, but close enough to it. It is Почтовая Street, which at the beginning of the 20th century used to be a street for merchants, businessmen and salesmen, I'd say. But what is interesting for us guys, and for you I'm sure, is the fact that at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, right here, somewhere in these houses, was the very first shop of a well-known merchant, salesman, businessman, a father of cosmetics. Max Factor! Could have guessed? Yeah, his biography is very interesting. A poor Polish Jewish guy whose father was a simple working person. When he was 7, he was a boy selling sweets. When he was in his teens, he was aiding in a drugstore. When he reached his 20s, he became a makeup specialist, first in local regional theatre. Then he moved right here to Ryazan, into one of these houses, and opened his very first shop. He was very hardworking, very decisive, a true American-style businessman who cared about profit and about showing them all up. And he succeeded. One day, the Royal Theatre was coming through the city, and they noticed his shop, and they came and bought his produce. And since then, Max Factor first became a primary makeup master in the St. Petersburg Theatre, then an assistant to the royal family in the questions of makeup, and in 1904 he finally moved to the USA with his family, where the story of Maximilian Factor, Max Factor, the father of all global makeup industry, began. But it all began here, in Ryazan.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it hasn't been rebuilt since 1900s, but it's history. And speaking about history, we are moving a little bit further from the city center, but closer to Kremlin and to fun facts I love so much.
Reasonably cold, so let's be short about it, okay? So we are at the local Kremlin. The whole complex is dating back to the 12th century, at least the oldest parts. The recent archaeological studies suggest that the first settlements actually appeared here about 80,000 years ago. There are actually lots of archaeological discoveries and sites and camps all around the Ryazanski region, but we are now in Kremlin, and let's talk a little bit about it. Kremlin, as in every Russian city, was built primarily as a defense measure. Right now, complex also includes the male monastery and adjacent churches and cathedrals. What else to say? The first Kremlin appeared at the 9th century, I'd say, but it was a wooden one, and of course nothing remains nowadays because it was all either destroyed or burnt down in natural fires or by arsonists, as it usually happens. So what remains is the latest one, which is the 15th, 16th century and some parts of the 12th century. It is built on the hills
and as you can see, the winds are very strong here, and I'm freezing to death right now. And after the city and most of the Kremlin was destroyed in 1230s by the Golden Horde, which was moving to Moscow region. Yeah, and Ryazan was like the first victim of the yoke, which lasted for about 300 years until we presented United Front. But during the Kulikov struggle, they sided with Tartars. There are lots of speculations. Nobody knows particularly why they did it, but I suspect they did it primarily in self-defense, in order to protect themselves from further destruction, because the first time Mongol Tartars came, the city was like, annihilated. Absolutely nothing was left, and it was a very tough blow to the city and to the region as a whole. So yes, during this battle in 1380, Ryazan was at the Golden Horde's side, and they lost. And who might have thought that this isn't even the first Ryazan? Did you know that?
By the way, fun fact. Did you know that the modern Ryazan, it's not the Ryazan that used to exist before the Tartars came? The original Ryazan is somewhat like 50 kilometers away from this very city. Nowadays it's called Old Ryazan, and nothing is left except for the ruins. As you can imagine, the Golden Horde was feeling particularly charitable towards the occupied territories and their citizens. So yes, at the time when Ryazan was a small princedom duchy, the capital was at the old Ryazan, but when the city was demolished, annihilated, it was decided that the capital of the region should be relocated, and it was brought right here to this place, and in remembrance of the events which led to the destruction of the previous capital, this place, which used to be called Pereyaslav of Ryazan, was renamed and is nowadays known as simply Ryazan.
So that's it. That's Ryazan with its Kremlin and history and Tartars, with Max Factor and Pavlov and churches and streets and constructivism and Art Nouveau, art galleries, theaters, museums, and of course Russian airborne forces. Come here and enjoy it all. Bye bye!